Colin Stanfield, the drug kingpin who died under suspicious circumstances. Colin Stanfield wasn't just another criminal, he was a mastermind who built an empire in the underworld of South Africa. Born and raised in the notorious Cape Flats, he understood the streets better than most. While many gangsters relied on brute force, Stanfield played a different game, one of strategy, influence, and quiet dominance. His operation extended far beyond street-level crime, making him one of the wealthiest and most powerful figures in the South African drug trade. By the 1990s, he controlled a multi-million rand empire, funneling drugs into communities already plagued by poverty and violence. Unlike the reckless gang leaders who flaunted their power, Stanfield kept a low profile, staying out of unnecessary conflicts. His network was vast, reaching deep into police forces, government officials, and even legitimate businesses. This wasn't just a gang. This was an empire built on discipline, fear, and corruption. Stanfield's ability to move in the shadows made him nearly untouchable for years. But as with all kingpins, power only lasts until the system decides it's time for a fall. And for Stanfield, that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. While the media focused on street violence, the real money in the Cape Flats wasn't in shootouts. It was in control. Stanfield understood that drugs weren't just a product. They were a system that kept communities dependent and criminals rich. His organization didn't just distribute narcotics. It manipulated economies, controlled employment, and dictated who lived and who died. The true power of the drug trade lies in its ability to make the law irrelevant. Police forces, politicians, and even community leaders knew that resisting Stanfield came at a cost. Those who opposed him either vanished or found themselves with charges they couldn't escape. But unlike other crime lords, Stanfield wasn't reckless. He was calculated. He maintained a level of order, ensuring that those under his rule remained loyal and that the public saw him as more than just a gangster. Some even viewed him as a necessary evil, someone who brought structure to chaos. But the more powerful he became, the more he attracted the kind of attention that no crime boss wants. And soon, the authorities began plotting his downfall. In the world of organized crime, it's rarely the murders or the drug deals that bring a kingpin down. It's the money. For all his careful planning, Colin Stanfield made one critical mistake. He got too rich to ignore. In the late 1990s, authorities struggled to pin violent crimes on him, but they found something even better: tax evasion. Despite having no official source of income, Stanfield was living like a millionaire, driving luxury cars and owning multiple properties. The South African Revenue Service, SARS, began investigating, uncovering massive amounts of undeclared wealth. By 2003, he was convicted of tax fraud, a charge that finally put him behind bars. It was the same strategy that took down Al Capone in the 1930s. When they couldn't prove murder, they proved unpaid taxes. But even in prison, Stanfield's influence remained intact. His operations didn't stop, they simply adjusted. The only thing left to determine was whether he would ever make it back to the outside world. Then, in 2004, the story took an unexpected turn. Colin Stanfield was dead. Official reports stated that he died of lung cancer, a seemingly natural end for a man who had spent years evading death. But almost immediately, rumors began swirling. Many found it hard to believe that a man as powerful as Stanfield had simply succumbed to illness. Some speculated that he had been poisoned, silenced before he could reveal damaging information. Others believed that his death was staged, that he had paid for a quiet escape, living out his days under a different identity. His rapid decline and the secrecy surrounding his final days only fueled the conspiracy theories. If Stanfield had truly been eliminated, the question remained: who had the most to gain? Was it rival drug lords looking to take his place, or was it law enforcement ensuring he never regained control? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: his death didn't stop the machine he had built. Colin Stanfield's death didn't end the drug trade, it simply created a power vacuum. The empire he built was too profitable, too structured to collapse overnight. Instead, new players emerged, eager to take what he had left behind. Some of his most trusted associates tried to maintain control, but without Stanfield's leadership, cracks began to form. Rival factions saw an opportunity, and violence erupted as different groups fought for dominance. The Cape Flats became even more unstable, proving that Stanfield's grip had been the only thing keeping full-scale war at bay. Even in death, his influence lingered, with many of his methods being copied by new crime bosses. The police celebrated his removal, but deep down, they knew nothing had really changed. The cycle continued, with new names replacing old ones, and the streets remained just as dangerous. The man was gone, but his blueprint for power lived on. One of the biggest reasons Stanfield was able to operate for so long was the corruption within law enforcement. It's no secret that South Africa's police forces have been riddled with bribery, backdoor deals, and selective enforcement. There were whispers that certain officers were on Stanfield's payroll, ensuring his operations ran smoothly. Some police raids were reportedly staged to look effective while leaving the core of his business untouched. It wasn't just the police, politicians and businessmen allegedly benefited from his wealth as well. The drug trade is a multi-billion rand industry, and those in power often find ways to profit from it. So when Stanfield finally fell, many questioned whether the system had truly wanted him gone. After all, if he was benefiting the right people, why would they destroy him? His downfall seemed almost too convenient, raising the question, was he sacrificed to protect even bigger players? And if so, who truly ran the drug trade in the Cape Flats? When Colin Stanfield died, his empire didn't just disappear, it fractured. With no single successor strong enough to maintain his grip, internal conflicts erupted almost immediately. The Cape Flats, already a battleground, saw an increase in turf wars as rival factions scrambled for control. The delicate balance Stanfield had maintained was shattered, leading to even more bloodshed in the streets. Some of his former allies attempted to keep his legacy alive, but without his strategic mind, they quickly found themselves outmatched. The drug trade didn't slow down, it simply became more chaotic. The police, instead of regaining control, found themselves dealing with an even deadlier situation. Violence spread like wildfire, with assassinations, kidnappings, and revenge killings becoming routine. What Stanfield left behind was not just an empire, but a system too deeply ingrained to be stopped. His death had removed a king, but left the game unchanged. The Cape Flats became proof of one brutal reality: when one crime boss falls, another always rises to take his place. Official reports claimed Colin Stanfield died of lung cancer, but to those who knew him, that story never quite added up. His sudden deterioration raised eyebrows. One moment, he was a feared crime lord. The next, he was gone. Some insiders believed his death was orchestrated, a silent execution carried out behind prison walls. If Stanfield had information that could expose corrupt officials, wouldn't it make sense to silence him permanently? Others speculated that rival gangs had a hand in his demise, ensuring he never returned to reclaim his empire. The timing was convenient, almost too perfect. He was convicted of tax evasion, sent to prison, and then, just as the authorities seemed to be losing their grip, he died. Poisoning was a theory that never faded, with whispers suggesting he was eliminated in a way that left no evidence. If his death wasn't natural, the real question was, who had the most to gain? And why did the official narrative never truly satisfy those who had followed his career? Colin Stanfield's story isn't just about crime, it's about how power operates in the shadows. His life demonstrated how a single man could manipulate an entire system, from law enforcement to politics. Even in death, his name still carries weight in the Cape Flats, a symbol of what's possible in the world of organized crime. Some people saw him as a villain, a man who destroyed lives for profit. But others, especially those who lived under his rule, viewed him as a necessary force, one who provided structure in a lawless world. His empire may have collapsed, but the methods he perfected are still being used by the next generation of crime lords. The drug trade hasn't stopped, and in many ways it has only become more sophisticated. Stanfield's greatest legacy isn't just in the wealth he accumulated, but in the system he left behind. A system where the rich profit, the poor suffer, and the authorities remain complicit. And as long as corruption exists, there will always be another Colin Stanfield waiting in the shadows. The rise and fall of Colin Stanfield is just one chapter in a much larger story. Organized crime in South Africa has existed for decades, and his death didn't change that reality. The same forces that allowed him to thrive are still at play, fueling a system where violence and power go hand in hand. Politicians make promises, police claim victories, but in the end, the streets remain controlled by the underworld. The question isn't whether another Stanfield will rise, it's who will be next. His story is a warning, a reminder that crime doesn't simply vanish when one man falls. The deeper issue is a society where crime isn't just a choice, but often the only way to survive. Until that changes, history will continue repeating itself, with new names, new faces, but the same brutal reality. Stanfield's death wasn't the end of an era. It was just another twist in a story that never truly ends. And for those still playing the game, his life remains both an inspiration and a cautionary tale.